I'm always grateful to be in a room with other people who know that following Jesus is hard to do. And as we like to say, the brain can do a lot of hard things for a really long time, as long as it doesn't have to do it by itself. And so that's one thing. I'm just deeply grateful to be in a room, because if I don't know what it's like for you, but following the King is not easy to do. Amen? It is the most joyful thing that we do, and it's also perhaps the most difficult thing that we do. And the second thing that I would want to invite us to consider is that over the course of not just this time that we spend together, but also in the course of the time that you're here. Some of us, we come to these kinds of gatherings, we think, I left my real life at home. Right on? Yeah, and thanks be to God, I left my real life someplace else other than where I am. And I want to assure you that this is your real life. What you're doing here and now, this is the only time you ever have. We don't have 5 minutes from now. And the real question is not just what am I going to say or what has been said already or what are we going to learn, all those things. The real question is, in what way am I paying attention to what the work of the Spirit is doing in this moment? What is the Spirit trying to do in me, through me, to turn me into the kind of person that God wants me to become? You can get all the information that you need, that you come here, you can get that on Google. You don't have to come here to do this. But in order for us to be formed into the people that God is trying to form us into, that requires us being in a space with other people that God is going to use to do that very thing. And so my invitation is for us, even as I share some reflections over the next few minutes, my invitation is for us to be curious about and open to, what is the Spirit doing? What is the Spirit asking me to do? What is the Spirit talking to me about regarding my own story and regarding the story that I am helping to co-create with others who are in my sphere of relational circle? A couple of other things just to say. I am, as we said, I'm a graduate of Malone College and now university, and I've had the privilege of I've been married for 39 and a half years. I've had the privilege of living and working in the Washington, D.C. area, working as a psychiatrist for the last nearly 35 years. And I get it. We're doing everything we can. Being a psychiatrist in D.C., knowing that I'll never be out of a job. It's just going to be that simple. But one of the things as a psychiatrist that I do, I have the privilege of working with patients, and we treat all kinds of conditions. Patients come into our offices with all kinds of stories around being depressed and anxious, and so all the things, eating disorders, substance abuse disorders, marriage problems, a whole range of things. These stories walk into our office. And one of the questions that we often ask, and I'm going to ask of you today, the question is, to whom do you belong such that you are becoming who you are becoming? To whom do you belong such that you are becoming who you are becoming? Now, most people who come in to see me who have depression or anxiety or whatever the issue is, when they come to see me, they're not really interested in this question. They're interested in having their anxiety cured. They have a problem, and they think the problem exists outside their skin, or it's a thing that they have. They don't know that it actually has to do with themselves. And so we ask this question, as I ask us, to whom do we belong? Because as it turns out, we become as we belong to others. But that prompts another question. And it's a bigger question, and it's a question that's crucially just as important, and that is, in what story do you believe you're living? In what story do you believe you're living? Now, most of us would say that we believe that we're living in the gospel narrative, that we're living somewhere in the biblical narrative, somewhere between the first and second coming of our King. And I will tell you that much of the time of my life, I'd like to believe that that's the case, but then I will have some incident in my kitchen with my wife. Is anybody here with your spouse? Right, you know about the incidents in the kitchens. We know about these things. There's an incident, and in that moment, I can tell you, I am not believing that I'm living in the biblical narrative. My wife will assure you he doesn't believe in that moment that he's living in the biblical narrative. In what story do I believe I'm living that is shaping how I'm answering the question, to whom do I belong, such that I'm becoming who I'm becoming? Now, this raises the question about in what story we believe that we really were living. And we would say that if it were up to about 500 years ago, we would say that we were living in the world of wisdom. My friend Jeff Dudiak from the King's University in Edmonton would say that up to 500 years ago, we were living in the world of wisdom. Charles Taylor and Ian McGilchrist would follow this with different angles on this same story. And between 500 years ago and about 70 years ago, we would say that we transitioned from a people who believe that they're living in a world of wisdom to people who believe that they're living in a world of knowledge. With the Enlightenment, with modernity, we transition to people who believe that if we know enough, we can solve all the world's ills. But in the last 70 years, we've become people of information. And we think that as long as I have enough information, that I will have everything that I need. And I want to give you a couple of examples, one general and one specific, that would indicate what the implications of this are. The first general one would be that whether you know it or not, you are, I am, the world is trying to form us into the conviction that we are machines. Now, we here in this room, it's a self-selecting group of people, and we would say, well, Curt, come on, that's not true. We don't believe we're machines. We believe we were created in the image of God. And I want to tell you, let me just ask you this question. How much time did you yesterday spend looking at your phone? How many of us, when we get done with this session at 9:20, how many of us are gonna, the first thing that we're gonna do is that we're gonna whip out our pocket New Testaments. And we're gonna go over those verses in John's gospel that we just heard. And we're gonna spend the next 5 to 7 minutes just sitting right where you are. My guess is not many of us are gonna do this, but we will urgently reach for our phones because we have a relationship with our phone, the machine that is having a relationship with us and turning us into it. Are you with me? We don't know this is happening. The world does not want us to know this. Apple, Google do not want you to be aware that this is happening, but this is what is happening. What is happening to human beings now is what happened in Detroit in the 1960s and 70s. There was a time when human beings worked on assembly lines and they built cars, and now we have machines that work on assembly lines and build machines. I go to medical school, and especially in psychiatry, but it's true for all of medicine. You who are patients who've been to see doctors in recent years, you go to see the doctor and they start to ask you a series of questions. And they have the boxes that they're gonna check. And at the end of the day, they're gonna say, you have major depressive disorder. You have coronary artery disease because you are a machine that has checked the boxes and this is how you will be treated. But not only that, I have been trained as a physician to think in this way. And so it happens even in the very places where we want to care for people deeply. And we have no idea that even though we want to believe that we are humans, we want to believe that we are working with humans who come into our colleges and universities, it is important to know that the more powerful forces in the world are causing you to be formed into something other than human beings. Now, another more specific example of this was a few years back, I had the privilege of gathering in a room with the same number of people that are in this room and having a public conversation with a professor of economy, an economist from the University of British Columbia, and our topic was sex robots. I'm guessing that's not the word you expected to come out of my mouth. A lovely evangelical university gathering talking about sex robots. Her posture was, as an economist, her posture was that the advantage of sex robotics would mean that we would be able to prevent the prostitution business, that people would be able to have sex when they wanted to and then not cheat on their spouses. You see where this goes. And I raised the question for her. I said, do you think it's ever possible that someone would ever design a sex robot who will have headaches? Wait for it. Because no one is going to build a technology that will purposefully cause us to suffer knowingly. Because that's not why we make technology. That's not how machines are made to operate. But this is what we are being turned into. AI is not something that I worry about because it will become more human. AI is something we pay attention to because it will make us less so. But I want to assure you that this is the story that most of the world believes that it is living in. It is not the story of the biblical narrative. And why is all this important? Because at the end of the day, we have to be curious about what story do we who are Jesus followers really believe that we are in. And I want to invite us to consider paying attention to, we're going to brush up against some anthropology and brush up against some neuroscience and brush up against the thing that we call mental health. I want to invite us to pay attention to one verse from John's gospel. John's getting a lot of action this morning. And, when we're done, you can just whip out your New Testaments and just say, pay attention to this. It's one verse, and I want to invite us to consider that in this one verse, we can imagine that the entire range of Jesus' life, death, resurrection, ascension, and the coming of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost is contained within one verse. John 16:33, and we read this. These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you will have peace. In the world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. Now, what does this have to say to us about answering the question of in what story do I believe that I'm living, and to whom do I belong such that I will become who I will become? Well, one of the first things that we see when he says, these words I have spoken to you, he's not just talking about the preceding verses in John 16, nor is he talking about the preceding chapters of John's gospel. He's talking about the entirety of the biblical text. There's nothing about the biblical text that we read that is not Jesus speaking to us in some way, shape, or form. All of these words, and it would be important for us to remember that Jesus begins in the beginning. Most of us in the room live as if the Bible begins in Genesis chapter 3. Is anybody here anxious? Two anxious laughters. One hand. Okay, so you're not that anxious, but you're lying. That we are as anxious as we are tells us that it's difficult for us to remember that our story does not begin in Genesis 3. Our story begins at the beginning. And what does the beginning tell us? The beginning tells us that God was a God who creates not with violence, but by hovering. Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, and the world was formless and void and chaotic and was dark, while a wind of the Spirit of God swept and hovered over the deep. Every other Near Eastern religious cult creation story begins with violence. It begins with the gods who create humans eventually first having to shed blood and kill other gods, kill other humans, just so we can get to making the humans. And the God of the Hebrews comes along and says, violence is not the way I do business. He hovers. As leaders, I want to assure you that the first item of business for you is not to commit violence, it is to hover. And it's really hard to hover. Anybody here parents? Right, hovering is really difficult. I tell people, look, everybody should have the opportunity to kill their child at least once. And because we are people of the resurrection, we believe we get them back. but you have to choose carefully which moment you're going to take to kill them. We know this is true, but we serve a God who does not begin with violence, he begins with hovering. But it is difficult in our anxiety to hover. But what does he do? He approaches the chaos. How many of us in this room, we come with stories in our minds of the institutions that we run, of our own personal lives, of the stories that we have carried with us from the time that we were born. And chaos is a thread that runs through all of it. And in my anxiety in response to my chaos, I am doing everything I can to desperately try to make myself not pay attention to it. And what does God do? Our God comes right to it and hovers. And then what does he do? He speaks and brings order and purpose. We are called as leaders to speak and bring order and purpose in a non-anxious way to chaos. This is how creation begins. So this is the beginning of the story. So chaos is not surprising. What is often surprising is that we are invited to come and hover. And then we get this whole series of events, days 1 through 6, that is this rhythmic movement back and forth, daytime and nighttime, the water and the land, the water above and the water below. All this rhythmic movement that's taking place. God sequences things. He's a rhythmic God. He doesn't just say, let there be the world, and it all comes in a moment. There is a rhythmic, progressive movement of creation, of speaking, and there comes order and purpose, beauty and goodness. And after every movement, he pauses and he says, oh my goodness, this is so good. And the Hebrew word for good is also the same word that can be translated in, this is so beautiful. I want to invite you to consider that what you are about doing, you are about creating beauty and goodness in the world. This is your mission. There's nothing short of this. Whether you're talking about curriculum, whether you're talking about the budget, whether you're talking about what we're going to do with this particular department, all the things that we have to do, these are acts in which you have been given the opportunity to create beauty and goodness. But here's the other thing. God doesn't just make stuff and then looks at it and says, dang, that is really cool. The notion of beauty actually emerges as a function of him looking at it. It is important for you to know that the very actions of your looking at others is going to be the very thing that draws beauty forth from them. This is his rhythmic movement. And then we get to the end of the first page of the Bible and we discover some things. And it's a little odd because what we read, we would expect to read the same thing that we've read from verse 2 on. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Right on? But this is not what we read. What we read, we would have expected God to say, and let there be human beings, and there were human beings. No. God says, let us make human. He calls a gathering, a quadrennial of the divine council. And he says, let us make human, let's do this. And you can imagine Jesus being at that meeting and he's thinking, I'm not sure this is such a good idea. I see Good Friday coming. And God says, let us, in fact, not just do it on purpose, let us make them just like us. It's going to be one thing in all of this creation that is set apart. You're going to be just like us. And there are some ways in particular that we see that we are like God in ways that no other creature is. Here's one of the first things that we see. We see that because God makes us on purpose, right? He sees who we are going to be, and he says, let's do this anyway. He couldn't not have us be with him. Let me ask you this. Who is in your life currently to whom you belong, to whom you could say, or they would say to you, I can't not have you in my life. Who are the people? And I don't mean your spouses. I mean, who are your friends? Who are the people that you work with? Who are your neighbors? Who are the people who say, I only want to be in the world that you're in? This is a God who does things on purpose, and this sets us apart. We have intentions as human beings that horses don't have, I can assure you. We have intention. We do things purposefully. Here's the other thing. Because he does it purposefully, he also has this depth of longing. Let us make mankind. There is an expression of longing and desire that we have that no other creature has. We read about it later in the text. More words that Jesus has spoken to us. These words in which he says, everything is made beautiful by God in its time, for God has placed eternity in the hearts of humankind. And by eternity, we don't just mean in the Hebrew, they're not just referring to a measurement of time. They're referring to the quality of the depth of the life that God lives. They're talking about the intensity with which we long for things, and that longing is infinite. I take care of a lot of patients. I've been at this long enough now that I've been taking care of some patients who were in their teenage years or early 20s when I first started to take care of them. And they're now in their 50s and 60s. And these are people who have parents who are older. They're in their 80s and 90s. And one tends to think that as people age, somehow they will find a way to forget how to behave badly. And they don't. Some of us in this room know people. We may be those people. We certainly may have parents who are those people, who we just thought by the time she gets to her 80th birthday, somehow she will not continue to be the person that we had to put up with for the last 80 years. And you know, she finds another gear. And how many people that I take care of, despite the fact that we've known now for 20 years that I'm never going to get the mom that I wanted, why is it that I still keep longing for the mom that I'm not ever going to have? Because I will tell you, you are made with eternity in your soul. And that's important because it means there will be parts of our story in which we long for things that we won't have and thereby for which we will suffer. And so we are like God in this eternal depth of intensity of longing. And then there is this additional way in which we long for things because we long for things in a particular way. You know, we like to say that every baby comes into the world looking for someone looking for him, looking for someone looking for her. Everyone, every newborn comes in. Like I have the privilege of being a grandfather to Simon, who will be 1 year old in about a month. And like I'll tell you, like I got it bad as a grandparent. I got, like you get all the joy and none of the anxiety about being the parent, right? The child comes, they get upset, you give them back to mom. It's just so awesome. It's just, and those of you who are grandparents, you know how this works. And yet I'm just so deeply aware now that Simon is looking to be seen. And this is the first thing that we deeply long for. We long to be seen. Each one of us in this room, and like here's the thing, these things never stop. It doesn't stop when I turn 2. You go into your board meeting. Some of you have boards that you like. Some of you have boards that you like less. You go into the board meeting, you want to be seen. Because if you have a newborn that comes into the world and you put the baby on the steel table in the delivery room and leave her there, if she's not seen, she will die. If we are not seen, we will eventually die. Slowly, surely, internally, this is what happens. We first must be seen. But the next thing that we long for is that we long to be soothed. Right? Newborns come into the world, they are in distress, and then we see them, and then we soothe them, and then they are in a better place. And that also never stops. I'm wondering how many of us right now, as you're hearing, as you're reflecting on this and considering these things, what parts of your story have not yet been soothed? Everybody in this room has some part. with which we don't think we've been soothed. We haven't been. And I will tell you that to the degree that I need to be soothed, where there have been unrepaired ruptures, where I have needed to be soothed and it's not been, I'm going to have to burn energy to manage and contain that, and that is energy that I am then not having available to create beauty and goodness in the world. But if I'm soothed, then I am made to be safe. Now notice, this is the other thing that we are doing. As people who are in leadership, you are seeing people, you are soothing people, and you want them to be safe. Now, the word safe has developed a way of being in the world, shall we say, and has been appropriated in a way that is unhelpful. It's often the case now that when someone says, I don't feel safe, they're really saying, I don't want to do what you want me to do. We're not talking about that. We're talking about creating an environment in which a newborn, toddler, in which an adult is comfortable and confident in their skin to do the things that they were made to do. Now, there's two ways in which we need to create safety, in which we need to create a sense of protection. The first is, I need to protect the child. I need to protect things from outside that child's skin. In the same way, your board needs to protect you as the president to enable you to do what you're going to do. You protect your staff in order for them to do what they need to do. I need to be protected from things that are outside of me. But there is the second way that parents have to train children how to be safe, and that they have to teach children to be safe from themselves. The 2-year-old will run into the street if he is not restrained. We will do things impulsively that will create problems for us. And so I actually must also learn how to be safe from myself in order for me not to create havoc for other people around me. This is not easy for us to do. In the world of expressive individualism, where everybody should be able to do what everybody should be able to do, we forget what it means to protect others from ourselves. If I'm seen, soothed, and made to be safe, these longings that we have, then I learn that I am secure. These 4 S's, seen, soothed, safe, secure. And by secure, we mean this. I mean, I have now become enabled to go into the world and do hard things. I can take proper risks. I am summoned into places that I would otherwise nowhere and nowise go. But because I am seen, soothed, and safe, I'm going to go into a space where I will get my nose bloodied, I will get my knees scraped, I will get my feelings hurt, and I will be okay because I will know that there is a place to which I can return where I'll be seen, soothed, and safe. This is no different for we who are adults and in leadership positions. So when I ask the question, to whom do you belong? I'm asking the question, to whom do you belong such that you will be seen, soothed, safe, and secure, in order for you to flourish, to create beauty and goodness in the world. Because this, in being made secure, is what you were summoned to do. You were summoned to push the boundaries of Eden into the wilderness. This has not changed since Genesis 1. This is why when Jesus says, these things I have spoken to you, I just want to remind you all where this story began. This story did not begin with y'all are sinners. That's not the leading edge of the gospel. The leading edge of the gospel is you were made to become icons of beauty and goodness as you co-create the same in the world. This is what we are called to do. This is the story in which we are actually living, but we forget it, and we need to have others who are reminding us that this is what is happening in our families, in our institutions, in our personal lives. But it doesn't stop there. You get to the second page of Genesis, and there's a particular way that God makes these things, right? He makes things intimately. He says, I'm going to form this from the mud of the earth, and I'm going to breathe my breath, and you're going to become a living soul. And it's important for us to know that as humans, anthropologically, we are dirt and we are breath. And if you take either one of those away, we stop being human. But there is a particular sequence in which it happens, which is true for how neurobiologically we actually operate. We like to say that the mind operates bottom to top and right to left. First, you sense things, and then you make sense of what you sense. But we live in a world where we are machines in which, as long as we have information, we think we can think our way out of problems. because we don't have a sense of what the body is sensing, because we've been trained long ago not to pay too much attention to that. As long as I have information, as long as I can think about what I can think about, I somehow can solve my problem, even though my body, with all of its addictions, wants to tell me otherwise. And so we begin at the beginning. And we begin with this intimately. So here's the thing I would want you to know. We have no idea as human beings. God takes us so much more seriously than we take ourselves. And he has made us to be in the world in a particular way, which means when you walk into a room, your very presence, right? Just ask Heisenberg. When you walk into the room changes by your very presence. And the question for us is not, does the room change? The question is, am I aware of how I'm changing the room? Who will you name whose life today will be more beautiful because you have been in it? Most of us are not asking that question. Most of us are not curious. Most of us don't even imagine that that's something that we could be doing just by our very presence. Just by my sight line, just by my gaze, just by the tone of my voice, by the kindness that is in my body language, by my willingness to remain with you. When you say thank you to me and I say, can I just wait for a minute and just take that in? Like, that would be weird, right? You say thank you to somebody, right? We have this exercise that we give to patients. It's a gratitude exercise. And you think like, oh, I'll just keep a list of things in my journal at night, the things I'm grateful for. Good, as far as it goes. Take this one step further. You can do this. You can try this when you leave here. The minute somebody says thank you to you today about anything, you pause them and you say, okay, can I just take that in? And then, they're going to get anxious. Because they're going to think, like, you're weird. You're like, this is weird, this is odd. And you're going to say, yeah, but I just want to I'm not just taking in your words, I'm taking you in. You have offered me yourself, and I want to take you in. And you're trying to do this. You're taking time and space to embody, because you're waiting, because you're just not moving. Oh, you're welcome and moving on. With your body, you are creating beauty and goodness in the world for you, for them, between you. And we only do this if we take ourselves seriously as God does. Are you with me? This is how God makes things, from mud and then breath. And then we get further and we get that haunting line. Adam has been out on the back 40 naming people, not naming people, that's not yet, right? Naming animals, all these things, he's naming things. And God says, like, dude is alone, he needs a helper. And there's that haunting verse, right? It's not good for the man to be alone. And so he says, I'm gonna make somebody for him. Now, Adam doesn't get the memo. Adam is out doing his job, and the next thing you know, he's just succumbed to general anesthesia, right? And there he is asleep, deep sleep. And the next thing you know, he wakes up with a gaping chest wound. God puts it back together. Adam's like, what's going on? And then he looks up. And what is Adam's response? Poetry and song. It's important for us to remember, the first wound in the Bible is at God's hand. The first wound in the Bible. But the wound has an intention for beauty and goodness. There will be moments in your work, it might have to happen while you're here, where the work where you've come from, you're going to do something that is not going to be what the other person wants. And you are doing it for the purpose of bringing beauty and goodness into the world. We do this with children all the time. We set limits that they don't like. We wound them, right? They're scandalized that they can't have the juice when they want the juice. Well, you can have milk in the blue cup or the red cup. I'm teaching you to have choices. So wounded by that. I don't feel safe with you. Well, you're going to have to get used to danger then, I guess. And he brings these two together, and then he says there's going to be a particular way that we're going to invite them to make things that are going to be durable and beautiful. And the man and his wife were naked and unashamed, and this is crucially important. Because remember, these things I have said to you so that in me you will have peace. In me, you will have peace. There is this sense that peace is not going to come because of your theology. Peace is not going to come because of your technology. It's not going to come because of your information. It's not going to come because of your having made your budget this year, because you know that you're going to have to work on your budget next year. It's just one revolving door of anxiety after another. Amen? Right? Don't get me wrong. It's good for my business. I like this. In me, you will have peace. There is this relationality that peace is going to come to us because of how deeply well known we are. To whom do I belong in order for me to become who I'm becoming? He gives Adam and Eve to each other. The man and his wife, they're separate. They're diversified. They are differentiated, but they are linked. They are different, right? This whole notion that, like, I would love to make things with people who were just like me. You know, I've been married now for almost 40 years. And I don't deserve my wife. I don't deserve my kids. I don't deserve my life. But you know how it is for you married couple. Like you got married, and like how long it took? Like 6 weeks, 6 months. And you figure like, oh my gosh, I thought I wanted to marry Phyllis. And as it turned out, I wanted to marry me. I just wanted me to look like her, right? Because I thought that if I got her, who was really me, then I could have all the things that I needed plus sex. This would be awesome. Can we say that in here? Sex? Can you say the word? Yeah, I know, like, we're all believers, but I'm a psychiatrist. At some point, you have to say the word sex, right? Sex robots, sex, right? Sex. Is this being recorded? The man and his wife, and so here's the thing. Look, I don't know who I am. I cannot create beauty most durably unless I'm doing it with someone with whom I have great difference. I do not know who I am. I cannot make beauty and goodness in the world if my African-American sister and brother are not in the room. My Asian American, my Hispanic, I need to have women and people of color who are different than me. This is how we were made to create beauty and goodness in the world that is durable. Are you with me? But they are naked and unashamed as well. They're not just the man and his wife, which again is not just about men and women. It is about all the differentiated ways that we exist in the world as we are in this way. They are naked. It means they are vulnerable. They're not just unclothed. They are vulnerable. We humans are the only creatures that must put clothes on ourselves in order for us to go about our work. We are vulnerable creatures. The question is not, am I going to be vulnerable? You are vulnerable. The question is like, how am I going to use that vulnerability to create beauty and goodness in the world? Now, I know that there's some people who put clothes on dogs. That's also, that's diagnosably weird. Look, he's already got a coat. He did not ask you for the jacket. He's not that vulnerable. The man and his wife were naked and they were unashamed. Where here in our room right now, in your story, are you imagining how you feel vulnerable? You feel it. You sense it. You sense your anxiety. Human beings are anxious primarily because they are alone with themselves. They are not anxious because they have big jobs to do. They're not anxious because of the budget. They're not anxious because of this, because of that. What I am anxious about is that I will be left alone with the other thing that this verse tells us, that they were naked and unashamed. That is a word that is a harbinger for what's coming in the chapter that follows. It tells us what trauma is going to do to us. But Jesus is saying it's important for you to know that in me you have peace. In relationship you have peace between me and the Father and you. This is how peace is obtained, is by being seen, soothed, safe, and secure. Who do you belong to in order for you to become who Jesus is trying to turn you into? Because we get to the next chapter, and this is where evil begins to use shame long before any fruit gets eaten. If you read the text and the dialogue closely, we see that wounding is taking place of a different kind. The second wound of the Bible that takes place is one in which the intention is devouring. The intention is not goodness and beauty. Evil can't tolerate goodness and beauty. It is disintegration and devouring that takes place. And the entire rest of the Bible, until we get to the Gospels, is just one verse of the same song over and over and over again. And to put this into greater terms, we also recognize that one of the ways that God then creates for us as humans, he makes us systematically, meaning we are systems. The man and his wife, they have children. We live in systems. I can't survive without being in a system. The original intent was a system. We all occupy systems. And where those systems are working to create beauty and goodness, we know it's hard to do. And where shame runs amok, it becomes a situation in which the whole becomes larger than the sum of its parts. And so our systems now become a viral petri dish for where shame will do its work through me into other people in my organization. And this is the thing, because we are parts of systems, it means that everybody here in the room is going to play a role. You come out of a family. The family is the primary neurobiological and sociological system for all other systems in the world. There's no system that does not model it, which means that if you're a dude and you're a president, you're the dad in the organization. You might not want to be the dad. That's what you are. Or you're the mom. Or you're the oldest brother or the youngest brother. Any oldest siblings here? Firstborns? Right? Any lastborns? Yeah, y'all should have conversations at the end of the day, right? Because I'm the lastborn of 4 older brothers. They had a nickname for me, Little Joseph. Coat of many colors. We were born into systems, and so we occupy these places. And it's not just us as individuals, it's us as systems that start to disintegrate and walk through shame. And we know that this is happening. And Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble. And I don't have to tell you about the trouble you have. In fact, we're so aware of our trouble, we come to conferences like this, and the first thing we're going to try to do is to make sure that we don't show anybody what the trouble is that we're in. I'm going to want to make sure that they see that, like, I am well healed, that my institution is doing well. God is so good. Just turns out that, like, I'm not so good. You with me? And because I'm left alone with myself, which is exactly what evil wants, I then miss what Jesus is also saying, which is that, but be of good cheer. And you know, we look around at our world. We look at we look around outside, we look around inside in our institute, we look inside of ourselves, and we want to say to Jesus, you be of good cheer. How are we to be of good cheer when all the evidence that's pressing in us is trying to turn us into machines? We get 4 chapters later, and Jesus comes to the disciples on Resurrection Day. He doesn't knock on the front door, he appears because they're already frightened enough. And what does he do? The first thing he says is, peace be unto you. I want to suggest to you that the most important thing you're going to do when you leave here, when you go back to your institution, the most important thing that you can do is to be an agent of peacemaking, of coming into your space and saying, peace be to you. How will you be a non-anxious presence? We say we got all kinds of problems that are out there in the world and in our institution. Look, we are our biggest problem. Me with my anxiety, I am my biggest problem. My board is not my biggest problem. I am my biggest problem. The question is, to whom do you belong? Who is coming to find you? Whose job is it? I've been with I'm in pastors' gatherings all over the place, and I ask this question: whose job is it to take care of you? And they look at me like I have 3 heads. Like, I would ask this of the presidents and administrators, whose job is it to take care of you? And he's like, nobody's job to take care of me. Like, I've got to take care of me. I want to tell you, if you read the first 2 chapters of Genesis, you will know that's not how it works. If that's what you believe, you will find yourself in my office. I will enjoy seeing you. I will be fine taking your money. But that's not how we were made to live. He says, peace be unto you, and then he shows them his wounds. To whom are you developing relationships with whom you can be so vulnerable, whereby which you will then burn no more extra energy having to contain all of that pain that you carry, all of the anxiety that you worry about, such that you can then allow that energy to come forward for you to create beauty and goodness in the world, which is what we are called to do. We are called to remember the story that we are not just in, but the story that we are telling. I want to tell you, you don't just talk with your staff and your students about the gospel, you are the gospel. But I'm only able to be that to the degree that I am on a regularly cadenced basis being deeply known by the people to whom I belong, such that I can live into the most important question I have to ask, which is, who is the person that God is trying to turn me into, such that when his heaven arrives, I will be able to tolerate it. Dallas Willard once said, God will let anyone into his heaven who can take it. We are people, and we are creating institutions whose task it is to be outposts of beauty and goodness in the world, pushing the boundaries of Eden into the wilderness. As we belong to others, as we become. May it be so. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.